The Headhunter, 2018 indie film, a mix of fantasy and horror, a rare but fascinating combination. I have to start by immediately saying that I adored the film, and I would recommend it in a heartbeat. And if you can, go watch it blindly, because I think one of its key strengths is the way it approaches storytelling. It treats the audience with respect, and it does not rely on dialogue almost at all in terms of exposition. The story is told primarily visually, and the way it unfolds, the way it reveals one thing after the next, is, I think, masterful. So the best thing you can do is just go watch it right now. If you want to know more, here is a spoiler-free outline. The Headhunter focuses on the titular character played by Christopher Rick. He is this hulking warrior with a Viking-like beard that lives alone in a small hut, and every day looks much the same for him. He stays at home, he prepares his various ointments and mixtures that help him heal his wounds if he has any. He does minor improvements to the hut. Every once in a while, a horn sounds from a nearby castle, which signals the warrior to don his armor, put on a helmet, pick up his sword, and go answer that call. When he comes back, he is always visibly ragged from battle and brings with him a trophy, the head of another monster that he just killed. He puts the head up on the wall to expand his collection, and that's that. He leads this very rudimentary, routine life in front of our eyes until one day something changes, because the monster he is tasked to kill has a personal connection to him. That's about as much as I'm willing to say. The rest you'll have to discover by yourself. What you have to know, though, is that the film felt to me like it drew its inspiration in some of the very respected video games, even more so than film. And I don't mean any action sequences or fights. In fact, there are scarcely any in the film. It is rather calm and focuses on the character instead of the action. So the inspiration part applies to other things, the most prominent being probably the overall feel and atmosphere of an empty, dying world, with barely any humans in it, which brings to mind especially the Dark Souls series. The Headhunter feels like a somewhat post-apocalyptic fantasy film, but it doesn't mean the locations are a wasteland. In fact, the scenery is breathtaking. The movie was shot in Portugal and makes heavy use of the beautiful landscapes. So it's this living, breathing world that has nature in it, but it just lacks humanity. Humanity is mostly absent from it. Second major inspiration, I think, can be traced back to The Witcher, and this has to do with the profession of the character. Like there, this is a highly skilled warrior tasked with one thing and one thing only, killing monsters to protect other people. Even though there are major differences, Witcher is by nature a traveler, the Headhunter stays in one place, I think a connection can definitely be made, especially when it comes to the disconnect of the main hero from the rest of humanity, the loneliness of his life. That loneliness is accentuated by the fact that the Headhunter is pretty much the only character in the film. There are technically two other people shown at different points, but I think you can make a case that they are almost more plot devices than actual living characters. That role is reserved solely for the protagonist. So the question then becomes, how well is it executed? Because that's putting a heavy burden on your actor to basically carry the entire story on his shoulders, especially if you consider the lack of dialogue. The role is extremely physical, and Christopher Rick has to rely on his movements, his facial expressions, grunts, and especially the eyes. Consider also that he has this massive Viking beard, and that means that at best, he only has his top half of the face to work with in terms of conveying emotions. And then also realize that in some scenes he's wearing a helmet to top it off, which limits all of that to the eyes. But fortunately it works and it works wonders, because the filmmakers and the actor knew what they were doing and put great focus on making sure that since they had so few avenues of emotional communication, the ones that they did have were well developed. For example, there is a scene towards the end of the film where the Headhunter is chasing a creature in a dark tunnel during the night in the helmet, with only a torch that he carries in his hands as the only source of light. So there's only that one source of light, but it perfectly brings out his eyes, even in the dark, so we can see them properly all the time, so you can connect to the character. I think that shows that on the technical level, the filmmakers have done a terrific job, and that also extends to the rest of the cinematography, editing, play with light. I really enjoyed the music as well. Final point, which I sort of touched on, is trusting the audience to follow the story. When it comes to the ultimate ending of the film, it is really powerful and bold, but if you think about it, the movie leaves you several clues that that's precisely what will happen. These are not like hidden secrets. It's things it's things out in the open, but still I would say they're communicated with much more subtlety than mainstream cinema tends to do nowadays. So if you're not really focused on following the film, if you're playing on your phone instead and you're not paying attention, you may still miss them. It's definitely one of those movies you have to devote your full attention to appreciate it, which honestly isn't that hard because it is very engaging and it isn't very long. It runs for just over 70 minutes, which barely makes it a feature film, and yet it uses every single one of those minutes to the max. I think Headhunter is an excellent example of intelligent visual storytelling and a brilliant entry in this rare genre of fantasy horror. It shines with the acting, the cinematography, the storytelling, and most of all, its atmosphere. I loved it.